Hello, welcome to the Human Trafficking in Native Communities webinar hosted by the Alaska Region Training and Technical Assistance Center. About ANA, ANA promotes self-efficiency for Native Americans by providing discretionary grant funding for community-based projects and training and technical assistance to eligible tribes and Native organizations. ANA's vision is that Native communities are thriving. A little bit about the Alaska Region team. The regional director is Anthony Chioli. Training manager is Angela Camus. Technical assistant manager is Charles Peel. And the outreach and technology specialist is myself. What do we provide at our TTA Center? We provide free tools, training, and technical assistance to build local capacity, strengthen collaboration, and develop strong community-based programs and projects that will benefit your community. The free resources we provide is training, technical assistance, webinars, useful tools, and guides. Upcoming events, the next webinar will be hosted by on January 26, 2017, and the topic will be Native Language Projects, Increasing Language Use Within Communities. Other events is will be hosted is on their last day on Post Award, and Alaska will be hosting their PPD training in Anchorage on January 31st and February the 2nd. January is National Anti-Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month. The Administration for Native Americans, ANA, is highlighting this topic because among diverse populations affected by human trafficking, indigenous peoples worldwide are particularly at risk for both sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Native Americans, Alaska Natives, and Pacific Islanders have a heightened risk for sex trafficking among Native women and girls. The definition of human trafficking is also known as trafficking in persons or modern-day slavery. This is a crime that involves the exploitation of a person for the purpose of compelled labor or commercial sex act. The United States defines as severe forms of trafficking in persons as sex trafficking in which a commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or with which the person is induced to perform such act under the age of 18. It's also known as the recruitment, laboring, transportation, provisions, or obtaining a person of labor or services through the use of force, fraud, coercion, and the purpose of subjecting of involuntary servitude, peonage, debt, bondage, or slavery. Human trafficking statistical data in the Native communities. Currently, they are collecting data, and the current available data is through the Polaris Project, which is the Office on Anti-Trafficking in Persons grantee. This is a visual of locations of potential human trafficking cases in the U.S. Human trafficking is an issue in Native communities, and our webinar goals are to look at current policies and available ACF and ANA resources because centers around the nations are beginning to tackle this issue. So I'm excited to introduce our guest speakers. Unfortunately, Park had to cancel due to personal circumstances, so we have Laura James and Dawn as to fill her in. And we have Felipe Kingara. She's the program specialist with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office on Anti-Trafficking in Persons. Laura and Dawn, if you can introduce yourselves, that will be great.
Sure. This is Laura Jones. I'm the Director of Programs over at the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center in Minneapolis. I'm not sure what else you want to know about me, except that our programs we're a multi-service organization, and sex trafficking has been, we've acknowledged this as a reality in our community since the inception of our agency back in 1984. So it's not a new conversation for us, but certainly since about 2008, there have been significantly more resources and more room to discuss the realities of sex trade and commercial sexual exploitation as experienced by our urban American Indian community in Minneapolis. And we appreciate ANA's support in helping to make things better for our folks in that department. So, Dawn?
Hi, my name is Dawn Buracher. I am the Tribal Regional Navigator with the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center. I'm one of 11 regional navigators within the state of Minnesota that work specifically with the Safe Harbor program, and I work specifically with the tribes here in Minnesota.
All right, thank you. Okay, great. So ANA says ANA promotes social and economic self-efficiency in communities through the SEDS grants, and these competitive financial assistance grants support locally determined projects designed to reduce or eliminate community problems and achieve community goals. ANA SEDS previously was funded for the Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center, combating sex trafficking and commercial exploitation in Native Community Population Project. Petra was gonna, she was gonna talk about the project, and Laura and Dawn can talk about it now.
Yep. Sure. We can go ahead and start. I don't have access to controlling the PowerPoint, and I haven't done a webinar presentation before, so you all just tell me what I need to do to get us started here. There we go. The Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center is, we were started in 1984 by local Native American activists grew out of the American Indian movement to address service gaps in, there just weren't a lot of services specifically for Native American women at all, and what was available had not been developed by Native people for Native people. So MIWRC came about in order to remedy that situation. We currently operate 14 different programs in the area of housing, learning center, library and training center, family stabilization programs, which primarily work with families who are involved in child protection in some way. Nokomis and Dodd is a dual diagnosis outpatient treatment program that works with Native women who are experiencing intersectional problems with chemical dependency, sexual trauma, and mental health issues. Sacred Journey Department focuses primarily on gender-based and gender-based violence. Most of the time there's a sexual exploitation or a sexual violence component to those programs as well. We don't separate out domestic violence from sexual violence, because most of the time the two are intertwined. And then we provide clinical and traditional mental health services, including mind-body medicine, modalities which have been indigenized and adapted by our elders and residents to be culturally congruent for our clients. Aspect of our mission statement is that we work on a continuum of direct service, community engagement, and systems change. We recognize that providing direct services is necessary and good, but it's not going to solve all the problems. And we also acknowledge that focusing specifically on advocacy and policy work doesn't get our people what they need when they need it either. So we try to be inclusive and work it from all angles.
Okay, you can say next slide when you're ready for the next slide.
Oh, next slide.
All right, thanks.
We have produced 2 research publications. Shattered Hearts, which came out, I believe, in 2009, was, as it says, the first research in the United States to analyze the scope of sexual exploitation, specifically of Native American women and girls. Other reports throughout the years they have touched upon it, but this was a very specifically organized project to bring attention to the disproportional impact in our community. And then in 2012, we conducted a benefit cost analysis to prove to people who say, you know, show me the money, show me how intervening in commercial sexual exploitation of children will have a long-term impact. Both of those reports are available from our website at www.miwrc.org, and you can also contact us to order hard copies if you'd like. Next slide. I'm going to turn over to Dawn here because she has more experience in this realm than I do. So, Dawn.
So as you can see, the FBI has identified Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area, the Twin Cities area, as one of 13 United States cities with a high incident rate of child prostitution or child sexual exploitation. Next slide, please. So we know multi-generational trauma and the normalization of trauma all play a role into the high rates of sex trafficking within our indigenous populations. And it also, it's kind of interesting because we've always known that historical trauma was a thing. We've called it blood memory, but now it seems to be receiving more attention now that Western medicine has caught up to it, and now it's like the science of epigenetics actually proves that the coding on the DNA gets affected when people have experienced trauma, and that gets passed on to other generations. Next slide. As you can see, this graphic can be found in our Shattered Hearts report. It shows the individual cumulative effects, how family and friends affect people, how the neighborhood affects that, and how the influence of major society affects that. Yeah, go ahead and get to the next slide.
Okay, so the project that ANA funded between 2013 and 2016 was called Oshki Wayashkad, which is, I believe, New Beginnings in the Blackfeet language. This program served female identifying youth between the ages of 11 and 21 who had either already experienced sexual violence or exploitation or were at extremely high risk for being trafficked or otherwise victimized. Our focus was to meet our girls where they're at, providing harm reduction focused individual case management, peer support group and cultural activities, and primary goals were completion of education and career planning goals, helping them to build not only personal resilience but also the life skills that were pivotal to reducing their vulnerability to being trafficked. Because if you can get your own needs met through making your own money, then that's one less hook that people can use to drag you into the trafficking circles. Next slide. Our youth, I'm not telling anyone anything they don't already know, that our youth are extremely vulnerable due to a wide range of interconnecting reasons, extreme intergenerational poverty for a lot of our families, addiction issues with parents or guardians that leave adults unable to meet the needs of their children and their youth, especially their emotional needs, lack of ties to cultural identity and support that can help people build resilience and self-esteem, the realities, at least in our urban area, of gang influence and of organized crime in their peer and family circles, the knowledge, whether acknowledged openly or not, that being involved in sex trade is something common within the family circle, maybe something that aunts are currently doing, grandmas, moms, may have become a normalized aspect of a family trying to get things that they need. Emotional distress, drug or alcohol abuse within the young person themselves, unstable housing, and especially if you're a runaway or throwaway situation, a huge issue for a vulnerability for our young people, especially if they're couch hopping or falling in with people who are going to then demand that they earn their keep if they're allowed to stay at their house. Certainly a history of physical or sexual victimization prior to trafficking concerns, and the realities of not perceiving that they have any other way to make a living due to lack of educational or workforce skills. Next slide, please. So these characteristics, these are characteristics that we were seeing in our young women that helped us to develop programming that was trauma-informed and that was hopefully, in a better position to encourage trust and meet our young people's needs, whether they disclose commercial sexual exploitation or not. Our youth, the youth that we've been working with are very, very mistrustful. They've had a lot of people make promises of help to them that have then disappeared. Especially for our young girls who have been through the foster care system, lack of consistency of emotional support from consistent caregivers makes it difficult for them to bond with anyone enough to build a good trusting relationship. Emotional relationships with the trafficker in their life, either feeling responsible for that person or to that person. Many of our young women have children with the people who are trafficking them, which, leads to complications, or the reality is that they may either be or have been in the past trafficked by a family member with whom they have an emotional bond. This, of course, leads to people being afraid to depend on anyone for anything, the attitude of you got to go it alone, you're the only one who's going to take care of you. Many of our girls were either reluctant to disclose the fact that they were experiencing sexual violence or being trafficked, or they didn't have a framework of understanding of exactly what a healthy sexual relationship looks like, and they thought that what was being done to them was okay and normal. Did a lot of education around raising awareness of exactly what sexual exploitation and sexual abuse is. Difficulty in distinguishing danger and chaos from fun and excitement due to, biochemical issues related to trauma that make all adrenaline feel like the same thing, whether it's caused by a fun activity or a dangerous activity. And yeah, this pronounced inability to relax, always feeling jumped up, very difficult to let down their guard unless they were utilizing some sort of chemical. Next slide, please.
Okay, so a lot of the things that keep these girls and women, and I don't want to exclude the boys and men because they're also involved as well. Obviously, no safe place to sleep. There's a severe shortage of safe housing here. Lack of shelters in the United States designated specifically for sex trafficking victims. We have a lot of domestic violence shelters, and I think what needs to happen is, I apologize if you guys can hear a fire truck behind me. Okay. I think what needs to happen is some training with our domestic violence shelters on how to appropriately work with this specific population. Huge distrust of the system, and sometimes we even get that being where we're at, a non-governmental agency organization. Sometimes we're seen as just, oh, you're just another social worker, right? In our community, there's this huge fear, shame, don't talk rule. And I'm willing to bet that is probably, you can probably trace that back to the boarding schools. we need to start educating our funders, and there's also a lack of awareness and understanding of the crime of sex trafficking. Next slide, please. Okay, so now what, right? So if you have identified somebody who has been sex trafficked, there's more to getting them help than just giving them help for their sex trafficking, right? Because that can lead into so many things. Drug addiction, they're going to need help specifically for drug addiction. Some help wading through all of that historical trauma stuff. Housing that is specifically designed for sex trafficking victims, trauma-informed services. And if they're interested, helping them get back in touch with their culture, because one thing that we've noticed is that a lot of these girls don't know anything about it. Yeah. Next slide, if there is another one.
Okay, so these are some points of knowledge that we want to pass on from our experience with working with young people who have either been trafficked or at high risk for trafficking. All of you have met these young people. All of you have had your own experiences with what works and what doesn't work with your young people. So this is just what we found to be effective. It's necessary, to approach from a victim-centered ideology that's trauma-informed. Not going to make any young person do something that, just because we think that it's the right thing to do. We all know that. We have to listen to them and meet them where they're at and listen to what it is that they want, and try to start working from that place, not primarily in order to build up rapport and build trust. Understand most victims don't identify that way. We take a strengths-based approach to working with these young people, and sometimes that includes not calling them victims. They're within the parameters of what's required by mandated reporting or legal issues. That's of course something that needs to be worked around. But if a young person isn't ready to disclose sexual exploitation or doesn't view sexual exploitation as something negative in their life, instead they view it as a way that they are getting things they need, or that they're getting power, or that they have power in being able to provide for their family or being able to provide for their children, then that's where we need to meet them and start working with them from what they view as their points of strength, while at the same time gently encouraging them to think that life can be better for them. Connection with language, culture, and ceremony has been huge for our young people. We, during the course of programming, hosted several language camps, language circles, that were very, very well attended. The young women really enjoyed those. They enjoyed working with our elder in residence, who a couple went through naming ceremonies or coming of age ceremonies that were very, very meaningful to them. And we saw a change in their perception of themselves as strong Native women as a result of participating in those cultural activities. Focus on empowering clients, being reliable, being consistent, and just being there for as long as it takes, and recognizing that, positive change comes slowly, and every positive change can be celebrated. Not everyone is going to exit during the time that we're working with them. Not everyone is going to survive during the time that we work with them, and those are sad realities. But it's always something to celebrate along the way, and helping people recognize that even small changes are something to be proud of. And just let the individual tell you what they need most from their own perspective. The more you listen to folks, the more you say, oh, okay, that's what you need. Let's see how we can help you get that, without always writing that difficult line of trying to not cultivate dependency, but rather to empower clients to make changes for themselves and to get themselves what they need. But nobody responds well to being told what it is that they need rather than identifying that for themselves. So next slide, please. I'm going to go ahead and turn this one to Dawn.
Okay, honesty, especially when you're working with this specific population, is probably the biggest deal. I always like to start off by reading the Tennyson warning to these individuals and letting them know that I am a mandated reporter. And that's usually how I start the conversation off before I do any kind of intake, just so they know what I am. I tell them what that consists of, what happens if they do tell me something that I've got to report. And never promise anything you can't deliver. Like never say I promise, because you never know what's going to happen, right? Be consistent, because this population's used to inconsistency, and just be there for as long as it takes. Sometimes it can take years and years and years. I know one individual who had been through 13 treatments and had been in the life for about 20 years, and upon her 13th treatment, that's when it finally clicked for her. And also, like Laura had just said before, let them tell you what they need instead of us always telling them what we think works for them, right? Because we're telling them what we think works for them from our own perspective, and we're not in their shoes. Next slide, please. So being trauma informed, it kind of means just being honest with yourself. Recognizing that a person might not be comfortable or might not even know how to communicate what has happened to them, and that sometimes communicating what has happened to them is also trauma in itself. Create supportive environments that treat these people as people, because that's what they are, right? Not as a patient or a data point. I've seen some people do intakes where they actually sit down and pull out a folder and pull out pieces of paper and just kind of run down the paper as a checklist, talking to the person across from them. But that's not what I like to do. I just like to have regular conversations, and I'll make mental notes of what the conversation consists of, and then I'll go back later and fill those things out. And acknowledge that these people are not acting, they're actually reacting constantly. So what we might view as negative behavior, it's not that they're intentionally being negative, it's that they're reacting from something they haven't had time to heal from. And next slide.
Yep. So considerations, again, some of this we've hit upon already. The majority of the youth that we're working with through this program have poor trust relationships, perhaps no consistent adults in their lives who can treat them in a positive way. The presumption, because of their life experiences, that everybody wants something from them, and that there's always going to be some sort of hustle, and you have to get it from them before they can get it from you, kind of situation. That's something that's something that needs to be met head on, and realize where it's coming from, and realize that it is in some ways a positive coping strategy that hopefully we can help young people learn to put down when it doesn't serve them any longer. Prioritizing cooperation for prosecution versus trauma-informed centered approach will be apparent to them. So if law enforcement is there for the enforcement of law and for the prosecution of criminal activity, and we're glad they're there and we work with them. We are here for helping our clients, especially our young people, either stay safer or heal from trauma that they've experienced. Sometimes those two end up at cross purposes with each other. So we have been fortunate in that we have some good allies in the sex crimes unit there at the 3rd Precinct. It's the Minneapolis Police Department. If that's an option for you where you're living, we encourage people to develop those relationships where possible. And if it's not, then that is an unfortunate reality that a lot of our communities live with too. Many of the young people that we see, they're not going to be able to reunify with their families. They really just may not have anyone in their nuclear or extended family who is in a position to provide them with a healthy and safe home. If that's the reality of the youth that we're working with, then we try to help them brainstorm other safe people that they can, yeah, how we call it, how to extend your chosen family is a phrase that sometimes we use. That requires being able to, develop the skills to identify what's a healthy relationship versus not a healthy relationship, and what your options are versus what other people may be wanting you to consider as your only options. And yeah, we try at our agency to take care of each other because this is really, really hard work, and it's hard, especially for those of us who come from a survivor perspective ourselves, either of sexual violence or of having the experience of being trafficked when we were younger, both, be careful with each other, take care of each other, hopefully in your agency leadership, the discussion of secondary trauma and the discussion of retriggering latent trauma, especially historical trauma, which everyone is suffering from to a various degree in our communities. As an agency or as a department, however you can do it, devise ways to take care of each other and check out for each other and help each other out when we're struggling with our own personal stuff as a result of the work that we're doing. Next slide. Source development. Yeah, we worked with all these folks. Whatever good relationships you can develop with your local school system, especially if you have a Department of Indian Ed where you are, the better relationships you can have with Child Protective Services, and again, better relationships you can have with law enforcement if that's a possibility. Whoever you can draw in to help you do your best for the young people and to help the young people get hooked up with what they need. Go ahead and have a lot of coffee with people. Next slide, please. Oh, that's it. Please feel, Patina's really sorry that she can't be here to do this herself, and I apologize for my lack of preparation. We didn't realize we would need to be taking over for her until late this morning. So would have liked to have done a better job for you here, but please feel free to contact us. We love talking with people. We love sending you reports. Please, we love you. Feel free. Any questions? Which Dawn is probably going to be able to answer.
We'll have a Q&A at the end, and I'd like to thank you both for filling in for Ms. Park at such short notice, and hopefully all is okay. Our next speaker is Velfa King-Gara. She is the program specialist with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Office on Anti-Trafficking in Persons. In this capacity, she is responsible for managing the Office Public Awareness Portfolio, including Look Beneath the Surface National Public Awareness Campaign and the Rescue and Restore Victims of Trafficking Regional Program, which funds organizations across the country to build local capacity to identify and serve foreign national victims of trafficking through direct outreach, training and technical assistance, coalition building, and public awareness. Previously, Ms. King-Gara was the program manager for the National Service Program at the Tahara Justice Center, a Virginia-based nonprofit organization that provides legal and social services to undocumented women and girls who are survivors of gender-based violence, including sex and labor trafficking, forced marriage and honor-based violence, domestic violence, sexual assault. In this capacity, she oversaw direct services provision to the agency's clients and developed a client center and trauma-informed approaches to service delivery. Ms. King-Gara holds a bachelor's degree in sociology and international studies from Virginia Commonwealth University and a master's degree in sociology from George Mason University. You can take over.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Thank you for the introduction as well. So I'm going to be speaking very briefly because I definitely want there to be time for Q&A at the end, and we're running up on the end of the hour. But basically, I wanted to provide a short introduction to our office, which is the Office on Trafficking in Persons under the Department of Health and Human Services here in DC. And our three priority goals are really essentially to establish a network of trafficking victim service delivery systems to ensure that wherever victims are identified across the country that they can access trauma-informed and victim-centered services, as well as to develop a culture of data-informed anti-trafficking programming and policymaking, which for those of you who are relatively familiar with our field, you'll know that data is difficult to come by, and there is no kind of cohesive data or no standards around data collection, making our work quite difficult to use to affect policy, increase funding, et cetera. And the last goal of our office is really to promote and integrate prevention strategies, because what we want is we don't just want to arrest our way out of this crime. We don't just want to come in too late when somebody has already been victimized. We want to make sure that we have some safety net in place to really prevent people from being victimized in the first place. And so that is kind of really the main goal of our office, of how do we integrate these anti-trafficking guidelines, policies, funding to local communities so that they can work on preventative messages, and that includes public awareness messaging, but also just an acknowledgement that there are reasons behind the victimization of individuals, and those have to be addressed, otherwise this issue will never be actually solved. Very, very briefly, we are, as you see, HHS is just one part of the federal government's response to monitor and combat trafficking. So pretty much every agency in the federal government has some sort of arm in trafficking, whether it's in kind of the criminal justice system, or in human services, et cetera. We are also, aside from just within here in DC and the federal government, we also have, as you know, HHS regions across the country. And in those regions, we have trafficking liaisons that assist in promoting policies, promoting programmatic work to advance anti-trafficking efforts across the U.S. I'm not going to go into this. It's not super relevant. There's an HHS response task force, essentially, where HHS ensures that we get everyone in the HHS to commit to promoting these opportunities, these programs, in order to prevent trafficking across the U.S. And our office also provides leadership within ACF, which is the Administration for Children and Families, to ensure that vulnerable populations, including Native Americans and LGBTQ youth, et cetera, are able to be identified as victims of labor and sex trafficking, and to access systems of care through our networks of grantees. Programmatically, something else our office does is we provide victim identification access through our network of grantees. We fund a number of grantees to do public awareness and outreach to ensure that local communities are identifying those at risk or who have already been victimized in human trafficking. When these networks identify someone who is a foreign national victim, so somebody that is not a U.S. citizen, legal permanent resident, or refugee, those individuals are able to access services to obtain what is called a T visa for foreign victims of human trafficking, and to also obtain certification letters allowing them to access public benefits, including food stamps, TNF, et cetera. And the reason that this exists for only for foreign victims of human trafficking, this type of financial or this type of immigration financial assistance is because the thought, though on the ground it does not work as we would like it to work, the thought is that U.S. citizen victims of trafficking can access TANF and other public benefits through their integrated systems of care, through the existing networks of care. And so, as we know, that's not perfect, and not everybody that has a need is able to access, but that is what the law provides us with. We are in the process of developing a child trafficking screening tool. Some of you mentioned the need for screening tools, but this will likely be available at the end of 2016. I'm sorry, 2017. That's a typo. To be able to distribute across the field. In terms of what our office funds, we have the National Trafficking Victims Assistance Program, which only serves, again, foreign national victims. And that provides coverage on an individual basis, kind of on a reimbursement basis for the absolute basics, accessing medical care, et cetera. We also have a new program called the Domestic Trafficking Demonstration Grants, and those are actually used to serve domestic victims of trafficking, so U.S. citizen, LPR victims, et cetera. And we are actually currently funding our office's first Native grantee, which is the Alaska Native Justice Center. And so we are finally being able to really focus on providing access and services to vulnerable populations, which is really an office priority. And so by this beginning, we hope to expand our work, both funding and collaborative with Native organizations. We very quickly, we also fund the National Human Trafficking Hotline, which is a toll-free hotline where individuals can report tips, seek services, and ask for help related to human trafficking, both as providers, victims, concerned citizens, et cetera. We also fund the Runaway and Homeless Youth Training and Technical Assistance Center, which focuses on providing that same assistance and other assistance to runaway and homeless youth. And I'll not go into that. We are running a little bit late on time. And so these are 3 other programs that we have available. And here, the one that I actually oversee is the Rescue and Restore Regional Anti-Trafficking Program, which provides grants to organizations that build capacity to identify and serve foreign national victims of trafficking through public awareness and outreach. And this opportunity will actually be available will be posted on grants.gov in this next few weeks, actually, because we've finished that cycle, and now we are starting our newest program, which is a Look Beneath the Surface Regional Anti-Trafficking Program, so formerly Rescue and Restore. And whereas that program previously only funded foreign organizations working with foreign victims, this one actually works with both foreign and domestic. So this presentation that I see will be sent out. So if you click the link, you will be able to access the website where you may read the grant forecast, and where we will eventually, in the next few weeks, be publishing the actual funding opportunity announcement where you can apply. The last thing, or one of the other last things that our office does, are the Look Beneath the Surface public awareness campaign. And so we put out brochures and posters and other free materials available for download. I neglected to include the site, I realize now. But actually, if you go to the website at the end of the presentation, you will actually be able to find those resources there. And so, yes, if there are any questions. Actually, I do see a question here. The HHS hotline is actually the same as the Polaris hotline. We fund it. Are there any other questions?
Thank you for your presentation. I think that was the only one. So for the recap today, we talked about ANA and the Alaska Region TTA Center, and our two presenters talked about their services. So right now you can enter your questions in the chat box, and our presenters will answer your questions. Looks like we have a question down there from Trisha.
Hi, can people hear us?
Yes.
Oh, okay. We had a mute button issue a moment ago. I do not know. The question is, Trish is with the San Diego Human Trafficking Task Force, CSEC Advisory Council. Does anyone know of a Native-specific task force? I myself do not. Dawn, do you know of one?
No,
Maybe.
not Native-specific task force when it comes to sexual exploitation. I know the city of Seattle and the surrounding Native communities up there are currently working on putting one together that is Native-specific.
Maybe we need to talk about starting one.
Yeah. I know within where our agency is located in South Minneapolis, we've had, for about 7 months now, we've had monthly meetings within the Native community concerning sexual exploitation within our community here in Minneapolis in regards to Natives, but I don't know if we've officially formed any kind of task force.
Yeah. Trish is asking if she may reach us after the call. Please feel free. Yep. Give a call to the number on the slide, and it will get to one or the other of us. Oh, sweet. Great. Thanks.
Is there any more questions? All right, if there's no more questions, 3-Star and ANA would like to thank you for participating in today's webinar, and the delivery of these webinars are to empower and strengthen Native communities by providing tools for success. Thank you. If you want to contact our office, here's our contact information, and we'll be sending out an evaluation form, and we'll be sending out the PowerPoint presentation. All right, thank you for joining me today on this webinar, and I hope you guys have a good day.
Thanks. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.